well, there aren't any levers of power. Just close your eyes. You're just closing your eyes to the fact that there is certain speech that is encouraged and discouraged. Until the day we pass away and we go to heaven, there's this constant fight for those levers of political power. The left is not scared at wielding them at all. Conservatives seem to forget it so often. We as conservatives for a long time are scared to pull these levers, but it's part of governing a society is you need to take a stand and go, are you going to get it wrong? Yes, you're going to get it wrong. But it's better to aim for the truth than nothing at all. Good morning, Idaho. Welcome to the Local Yokel Idaho podcast, where we talk about what is going on in the wonderful state of Idaho. For those tuning in for the first time, we like to have a little banter before we get into the stories, but I understand if you're short on time, so we provided the timestamps in the description so you can jump straight over to the stories that you're interested in. And for those that stay with us for the banter, welcome. Glad to have you here with us today. As you can probably already tell, I have an amazing red glow to my face. I got a little bit of a sunburn enjoying some fishing, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the more important thing is that John is back to co-host with me again today.
Yeah, I am here, Tyler. It's been an interesting couple of weeks, but I'm back in the saddle again, and so yeah, we're here to go.
Yeah, I know I've been praying for you. I don't know if you saw it, the last main show. I tried to be careful with what I said, but I just mentioned that there was some stuff going on for people to pray for you through all the different things that kind of hit you at once there.
Yeah, it was a whole slew of things. I threw my back out. I started a full-time job. There's some health issues with some other people in my family. And then we had a family reunion in the middle of all of that. And so, yeah, it's been just one giant, snowball rolling downhill of stuff going on in my life. So, yeah. But here I am again. We'll see how it goes.
Right. In any case, it will be entertaining. I know it's always a joy to have John here and his sense of humor or different perspective on things.
Sure. Different opinions are always good to have. I hope my sense of humor is, I don't know, I hope someone enjoys it. I enjoy it, and really that's the important thing to me.
Yes.
So long as I'm making myself laugh, I could really care less about anybody else, but there you go.
Right. Well, I know you probably didn't do too much with your back out, because that kind of kills a lot of mobility-related things, but...
Yep, I did a lot of laying in bed. And I watched any number of TV shows. I went back and started rewatching Battlestar Galactica.
I've heard about it. I haven't watched it yet. I hear it's super corny.
Okay, so there were two. I've not watched the original, like the really old one.
Okay.
They remade it at some point, and it was pretty good. They overused the word frack in place of other words that could be used, and it's just funny. No one talks like that. If you're going to swear, if you're not going to swear, then don't pretend. And they pretend the entire time, and it's hilarious. But yeah, no, the show's really good. It reminds me a lot of like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they deal with they use the sci-fi medium to deal with
a deeper topic or something.
Yeah, issues of morality and equality and humanity and
advancement of technology and civil rights or privacy and things like that.
Yeah, and all of these things. And it's a really interesting show, and it's fun. I made it like halfway through the show at one point, and then it fell off of Amazon, so I stopped watching. But apparently it's back. So yeah, I started watching that and watched some of The Expanse, which is another good sci-fi show. Yeah, listened to books, played video games on my phone. It was a good time.
I mean, you had a wonderful excuse for it. You're like, my back is out. I can't do anything else, so I might as well do something to occupy my mind, right?
Yeah. I also started to watch the Amazon Jack Ryan series. I think I was starting to watch season 2.
I've heard some people really like that. I hear it's off a book series, which my father said, well, I've already read the book, so it's probably not as good as the show. I'm like, well, every reader says that.
Right. And so the interesting thing about it is it's not based on any of the books. It's based on the character and kind of the broad framework that the books set up for the character. But the stories are modern. And so it's taking the character that was there during the Cold War and kind of transplanting him to now. So it's interesting. It's not as good as the books, but it's interesting. The one thing about Tom Clancy books that I really enjoyed are all of the interweaving storylines that just kind of go, and you never really know what or why the storylines are happening. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of the book, all of them start coalescing and they all converge into a single point. And you're like, oh, that's why we've been following a truck driver in Indiana for 7 chapters throughout this book.
Right.
Huh. It's because he randomly had an accident with the guys that were carrying the nuclear bomb. Well, all right then. Yeah, and it feels contrived, but also he sets it up like, yeah, he's just a truck driver. And then, so those types of random storylines aren't there in the show, but it's also a TV show and there's only so much you can do. So yeah, the show is fine. It's not my favorite, but it's all right.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Bourne series, not as extreme as that, but like if anybody's ever watched them, because look, I do watch some things. I'm not completely movie or TV illiterate. There's a few things I have seen, but when you watch that series of movies, they just throw you into it. One minute you're like, okay, wait a second. Okay, there's this person, there's this name, there's this thing or whatever else. And then the closer you get to the end, it's almost like it goes from you have to figure out everything to, okay, a grandma could figure it out by the end type of thing. And so it funnels you down and then you have this like aha explosion moment, which then, cinematographers know that, and so it kind of fits the style and stuff, and I've quite enjoyed it. But it is an interesting approach, and I guess for someone that likes their movies a little bit more slow, that might not be their preference, but it is an interesting take on doing it.
Yeah, I do like that approach. I really like the approach where you're just thrown into the middle of a story, as opposed to we have to set everything up and we have to explain to you the world and everything that's going on in it. No, just dump you into the story, into the politics, act as if we know what's going on. We'll figure it out. The Dune movies.
The new ones or the old ones?
The new ones.
Yeah, the new ones just dump you right into it. You're like, okay, what house is this? What are you doing? I mean, I need to watch the second one. I will admit, I was fully planning on not watching the first one, but I had the pleasure and joy of having friends that know better than me and took me to a theater, so I, for the first time, saw it in theaters, and now I need to see the second one, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, the second one was fantastic. I wouldn't say it was better than the first one. There were some storylines I didn't like as much, but it was still really good. And again, what the movies did best was capturing like the massiveness of everything in that world. Like the spaceships are just huge and the planet is big and the worms are like just the economy of scale that they managed to get away with was awesome.
Well, I've heard a couple people say that, not to say that the original films were bad, but just I forget the name of the director, and everyone's mad at me now probably, but for Lord of the Rings,
Peter Jackson,
that I've heard quotes of him that he was like, yeah, if you asked me to make you this movie 10 years ago, I would have said no, because I didn't have the cinematography to do it, but now I can, so it actually plays the story. There is a point where there's definitely movies in the modern era age that overuse CGI. They overuse a lot of these elements, but there's also other forms of media, especially sci-fi and especially Dune, which I feel you couldn't tell it until you got into the modern age now, where you have the graphics to make something that large, that massive, that realistic, with that detail that needs to convey what was being written in the books.
What's interesting, and so I don't know if you've ever run across the YouTube channel Corridor Crew. They do like movie graphics and special effects and stuff like that. They break down that type of thing. And they did a really interesting one where they were breaking down the new Dune movies against the old Dune movies and looking at some scenes that really mirrored each other. But because technology has become so much better, and they used technology very well in the more recent movie.
They didn't overuse it, was another cool
They didn't
thing.
overuse it at all. A lot of it was very practical. But a lot of the shots that looked so good were basically the same shots as from the original movie, just with good graphics. And it was fascinating to look at the vision of the original filmmaker be reflected in the new movie, to go, oh man, that was a really good shot. It just looked crappy because, well, the graphics were terrible.
Right.
But you throw some good graphics in there, and like it wasn't the fact that
the writing was not bad, but the cinematography and other stuff.
It wasn't the writing or the cinematography. It wasn't the directing. It wasn't the acting. It was that graphics just weren't there yet. Computer graphics weren't a thing when they made the original. And so so now that we actually have computer graphics, you can do some of these cool things. But yeah, anyway, that's long story short in a roundabout way. That's what I did with my time off.
You traveled to other planets. I went out to Owyhee Reservoir, which got me this wonderful sunburn. I don't actually think I've ever been this sunburned. And for the record, for the viewer, I am not a person that sits there and says that sunscreen doesn't work. It does. It has a place. My grandpa's a living example of this. But apparently 2 layers of sunscreen and a wide brim hat was not enough to contain sheer power of the sun over there at Owyhee Reservoir. It was great. We traveled almost the whole length of it. We went, I think, minus like maybe 5 miles of it or whatever else. I got to fly the drone, get some real cool footage. I think some of that's going to be released out on Twitter. I might send it over to have it edited into this. I'm not sure yet, but I did that on Friday, and then what did I do Saturday? I did something Saturday. My brain's blank. I mean, Father's Day was on Sunday, and had that, and that was great. Oh, that's what I did on Saturday, the Emmett Cherry Festival. I went over there for that. That was really enjoyable. It always seems to sneak up on everyone to a certain degree that I'll mention. I'm like, oh, the Emmett Cherry Festival's weekend. Everyone's like, what? It's this? Yeah.
Right.
But it was really good. It was a little smaller. Okay, so let's put it. There is the festival that's like a fair where you have all the rides and maybe vendors and stuff. For me, you could call that a cherry festival. I don't really, for the most part, call it that. For me, that's more the parade, because I can go to any fair, but the cherry festival has the cherry festival parade and actually going and picking cherries, which they're a little late this year, so Ken, if you're listening to us, it might be time to go pick cherries then. But the parade was it was a bit shorter this year, but it was a bit more grand. They had one of the, I think it's the lumber companies there in the valley there, that came through with one of the loads of logs they have, just these massive, big old things, like as thick as round as a minivan, that they pulled down the street for it, and that was really cool to see, and a couple other displays and stuff. So a shorter type of parade than usual, but still even more grand than I would say even last year was.
Nice. Yeah, that was one I know we've gone to it a couple years. The girls, the dance school that my daughters are in, they typically perform up there. And so we've gone the last couple years for that specifically, but then hung out there. And so it's a fun festival. I've enjoyed it.
Oh yes, it's always a treat to go over to Emmett. And if you haven't been, for anyone from the valley, it's not too far of a trip. Also, if you're up north, McCall, you can come down through Horseshoe Bend and kind of come across, which you can go through Sweet, which is a drop-dead gorgeous area. If you've never done that run between Emmett and Sweet, or no, Emmett, Sweet, and Horseshoe, there's kind of that cross bit there. That is a beautiful, like, Sunday drive to go up from Boise, go up to Horseshoe Bend, come across, come through Emmett, drop back out in Eagle. You will not be disappointed to take that drive over there by the Black Canyon Reservoir. That's what I did with my weekend. That is why I look particularly red, not because I am blushing, because yeah, not the case there. I am just, the sun has scorched me, and I am paying for my sins in that regard. But we'll move on to our stories here. So starting off with our first story here in our ongoing series, Idaho Bill Breakdown, Employee Firearm Protections, Senate Bill 1275. Last week, we examined Senate Bill 1317, which allowed for the addition of specialty license plates to generate funds for a gun safety education program in public schools. If you're interested on what that license plate is and more details of how that fund works, go check out that episode from last week. This week, we'll be keeping with the gun theme and a much shorter bill. This one is only 1 page long, so if you want to read it for yourself, it's super easy. We'll be examining Senate Bill 1275. Which was proposed by Senator Chris Trakel in the Senate and sponsored by Representative Ted Hill in the House. It gives legal clarity and added protections for employers that allow their employees to have firearms at work. In this specific segment, we'll look at why it needed clarity at all, what protections it gives to employers, and then look at how timely and encouraging for business owners and Idahoans this bill is. But like most of our other ones, if you're first time here for this series, we're first going to look at what the bill says, and I'll let John kick us off on that.
Yeah, so Senate Bill 1275 amends Section 5-341 of the Idaho Code and applies to employers who either allow or do not prohibit their employees from lawfully carrying firearms on their person or storing on the business premises. It protects employers. It protects employers from civil lawsuits related to their employees being allowed to have guns at work. It essentially shields employers from liability related to their employees' lawful firearm possession on company property. Now, before this bill was signed, Idaho law did not specifically address whether employers could be held liable for allowing or not prohibiting employees from lawfully carrying firearms at work or storing them on the premises. And for the average Idahoan, this means that business owners, and thus employers, cannot be sued if they allow or do not prohibit employees from legally carrying firearms at work.
So, bringing that all together, what does that mean for you? I would say it's quite a simple thing. If you're an employer, if you already were letting your employees have guns on your premises for ever work or on the job, look, you've got another protection now. If something happens with that employee or someone complains about them having guns, doesn't bother you, does not affect you. They are responsible for their ownership of that gun, and you can't be held liable for having those. And also as a person, that means, in theory, as an employee, you are more likely, hopefully, that your employer will let you have guns because there's less risk to them. There's no risk at that point because it's separated the two. That you can be like, hey, just let me carry. I'm asking to do it. I'm taking on the weight or responsibility of a civil case or whatever else. And even though this is such a small little bill, I think for the average person in Idaho, and especially since we love our guns so much, can see what a huge effect something like this will hopefully have, or at least allow a certain amount of safety for people.
Right. Well, because the question is, why would a company want to disallow employees from carrying firearms? I would assume it kind of follows the same principle that why do we not allow firearms in schools? Why do we not allow firearms in government buildings? Well, it's to try and minimize potential events that can occur. Well, the problem is, if you're going to commit a event with a firearm in a place where firearms are not allowed, well, all you have to do is carry the firearm to the place where the firearm's not allowed and commit your illegal action. Like, murder is already illegal.
But it still happens,
but
right?
But people still do it. You can carry a gun to an illegal place and, commit heinous acts. I guess, now you're doubly illegal. So on one hand, I can understand why someone would say, look, if we prohibit the firearms from being here, then no one can use firearms to do bad things.
Which in a perfect world, and everyone followed the laws.
Exactly. Problem is, that's just not the case. And, you can look at case studies across the globe where you remove... you try to remove firearms from lawful citizens, and lawful citizens no longer have firearms, but unlawful citizens do. And that's why we see firearm events happen where they really shouldn't. And so I can understand why a company would want to have it on their books to say, look, we do not allow people to have firearms. So if someone shows up with a gun, we can't be held responsible because he's not supposed to have it anyway. So take your insurance claim somewhere else. And so I appreciate this law saying that, well, as a business, you can't be sued if you say that employees can have firearms.
Or the other part that was interesting in this is that even if the company doesn't say anything, they're not held liable. So if your company doesn't even have a policy, but they just don't have any policy at all, they're still not held liable. So they don't even need to lift a finger in theory. Weirdly enough, if the company says that you shouldn't have a gun, then they're liable if you have a gun.
Right. Which seems backwards, but yeah, hey, welcome to our legal system where everything's backwards and none of it makes sense. Because it's all based on common sense.
That's in low supply at the moment at times, sadly so. But,
yeah.
I mean, bringing this also a little bit around to how this will affect you can obviously, if you're an employer, gives you some more shielding. If you're, an employee, in theory, it will give you the ability to have a gun. It'll make it more likely that your business will allow that, or at least you can carry it, even if your company doesn't have a policy on it, that then you don't have to worry about your employer being like, wait a second, that's going to affect me. No, you don't have any policy on it, so you don't have to worry about it, type of thing. But I think one of the byproducts also from this is that it hopefully is the key part here, hopefully it will allow businesses to allow for more gun ownership, which we already have such a low crime rate in Idaho, period. If you look at mass shootings also, which the definition of a mass shooting, you can go look that up. That is a flimsy one. Even there, we are a bit more, we're low on. And I would appeal to you, the reason because of that is the amount of gun ownership and criminals understanding that in public there are a lot of guns. And knowing that, especially employees who are actively there, they know the regulars, they know the oddballs, they know why, because they know everyone normally does this path to go over to the soda machine or whatever business you have, right? The employee will automatically know when you're being a little odd because they see a lot of people come in and out and do the regular thing that are honest people. So them having a gun is just another level of security, I would say, and would hopefully encourage and maybe have the added effect that crime and to a certain degree the level of safety in public venues or businesses that allow that's going to be even higher.
Yeah, there's a YouTube ad that pops up for, gun safety, and it starts out with, a dramatic someone pulling a gun, and the line is, you don't carry a gun because it's a weapon, you carry it because it's a shield.
Yes.
And I laughed at that the first time. We were like, gun, yeah, you're going to use like Wonder Woman's bracelets and block the bullets with your gun. No, but it's that idea of deterrence. It's hard to deter from a position of weakness. And so it's not that we like to carry guns so that we can shoot people. It's we like to carry guns so that we don't have to deal with shooting people.
Right.
So
carry a big stick and speak softly. It is to a certain degree, the speak softly part we Americans struggle with a great deal, but the U.S. military is kind of built on this concept, so I wouldn't say it's a bad thing for you to practice in your average society, which is, it's better to have the ability for retaliation than not at all, because then an enemy or a person that wishes you evil can do evil things. And I mean, that also comes to another core part, and I really truly believe it's something when you're looking at the other side, and I've said it again and I'll say it here, that the left and the right, everyone has their reasons that they come to. We are rational human beings made in the image of our Creator, who is rational, right? Has reason. And so everyone does come to their conclusions via reason. Not everyone's just crazy. Don't get me wrong, there's some people that need help and they are that. But that's not everyone. Most people have a logic that they get to a place. And if you're boiling it down to the smallest little bits, on average, I'm not saying always, but the people that I struggle with the most on the left will look at humanity as truly by nature being good. If you see humanity as being good, then yes, in theory, passing laws that restrict gun regulation or the ownership of guns or usage or carrying in public spaces is a good thing because people are good. And if you appeal to that goodness, they will put the guns away and not use them if you tell them not to, right? If people are good. That's the key little grain there. But as conservatives, I would say, for the most part, and libertarians even, we'll look at that, or just the right-leaning part of politics, period, we'll look at that and say, no, the default state of man is sinful. That's the Christian, but that we are not good. We are inherently evil in a sense, and that we need, to a certain degree, laws and regulations that either give me a equal opposite reaction that counters or restrains your evil or sin that you could possibly do, that gives accountability to you. That's why we have different branches of government, and same with the Idaho legislature, try to create accountability within those structures that try to balance that. Now, obviously, you're going to have the other side of it, which I've talked about also, that you have laws that encourage virtue and push away vice to a certain degree. But in this specific case that you are looking at, no, the default state of man is sinful, and even the best person makes mistakes and sins. And so thus you need a certain level of accountability that you take a double second. Even if you're having a frustrated day and you're driving, maybe you have road rage or something. But perfect example there, but everyone else can equally retaliate back to you. And do you really want I'll be a little bit nicer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, it's an interesting thing when you start looking at humanity and why people do the things they do. And if you take the view that people are basically good, or even people are neutral, well, then you pass laws based on that assumption. And that's just not the case. I have children. I know that humanity is not inherently good. We don't have to teach children to fight. Nope. We don't have to teach children to yell at each other and to hit each other and to bite. We have to teach them to not do those things. We have to teach ourselves to not be evil. And so having laws that stop evil makes sense when you know that the base desires of man are not good.
Right. So, point in case, number one, I think this is a good bill, something to take away. Maybe you talk to your employer. It will go into, I think it may have already gone into effect, because there are some of the bills that have been signed go into effect on June 1st. Some of them are in July, depending on the severity and stuff. You'll have to look at that, because that is the one thing I forgot in my notes. But it is something that is going into effect, and you might want to talk to your employer. Or if you can't find in your employee handbook or anywhere the fact that they regulate gun ownership, you may be able to do that now and not have to worry about your employer being on the hook for that. Which that brings us to the middle of the main show. Thank you for sticking with us this far. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. If so, please subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter to stay up to date on all things Idaho. For even more content and to support our work, check out our locals page. I know you'll love it. If you found our content valuable, please like and share it with friends and family. Your support helps us spread the word about our beautiful state and keep Idahoans informed and engaged. Thank you for being part of the local yokel Idaho community. Now, on to the next segment. And coming to our second story here for the main show, and kind of keeping with the theme of the nature of man, Be Proud and Broke, who is funding the Pride events in the Treasure Valley. So it's June, and that means that there are rainbow flags ever, humbly reminding us that God won't destroy us again in a flood. Actually, wait a second, I may have made a little bit of mistake with the script there. I might have copied something from the Bible. Well, let me correct it here. Now it is June, and thus human pride is on full display, even in areas of the state that could be called part of Idaho's Bible Belt. But with that said, you may be asking, how on earth has this happened, especially in these areas? Well, in this segment, we'll be looking at who funded the new Pride event in Idaho, the Canyon County Pride Festival, plus the response that came from all of that.
So yeah, sadly, most of us know there is a Boise Pride Festival, and on the midweek report, we reported on the Coeur d'Alene Pride Festival. But this year was the first time that Canyon County, or in this case, Nampa, had one. It happened on June 9th from 1 to 4 p.m. at Lakeview Park, but it was announced in the later half of May. And needless to say, for those outside of Canyon County, people were big mad. On May 28th, the city of Nampa issued a news release stating that while the event was approved through the standard park rental process, it does not reflect the personal beliefs and convictions of the mayor, city council, and many Nampa residents. Later, Nampa Mayor Debbie Kling said, "While this event does not reflect the personal beliefs and convictions of myself, the Nampa City Council, and many living in Nampa who have already reached out to us requesting it be canceled, the advice of our legal counsel was that the city of Nampa must recognize the protected First Amendment rights of those scheduling and involved in this event." And in the end, the event moved forward and, well, it still happened. Shock of shocks. Even though people were very up in arms about it on social media and probably in person too, but we tend to not really care so much about in person. Well, according to the organizer, 2,000 people attended the event, and granted, we're not able to validate that number, but that's what we said, so I guess we'll go with it. There was added security, and the event was fenced in, and there was light protesting outside, but nothing major. And then there was a quote from a protester by the name of Mr. Townsend. He said, "God says that gender is established by birth, by God. Anything that deviates from that is not normal." He also said they hate themselves and they want to be some other gender. And, I mean, frankly, I can't necessarily say that he's wrong. The social stigma around a statement like that is intense, but I don't know. For so long, a lot of these things have been considered mental illnesses, and to this day they still are, depending on what journal you look in. And So I would agree with this gentleman, Mr. Townsend, that gender is what it is. And honestly, so we were talking about people having logic and being logical creatures. And the problem with the logic of current gender ideology is that it breaks itself over and over again. And so there is no logic. The only logic that works is the fact that it is a religion with religious tenets and doctrines that you must believe in, or else it's not true. I saw a meme the other day that was the picture of, oh my gosh, the trans admiral or whatever, the person who's in charge of military stuff. And the meme was, believe in the science, except for gender. That's baloney.
It is a very fair point when it comes to the doctrine, or I say doctrine because that's really what it is, but the belief system that comes with the LGBTQ or whatever you want to call it movement is that it wants definitions. It needs definitions because if they want to fight for something, they need to say, this is this and this is not that. But then they want an infinite amount of things that, gender is fluid. But even the most fluid things in our world, if we're going, for example, of like materials, a thing can be a liquid, it can be a gas, it can be a solid. And that, it is a spectrum of the forms that things can take based on the amount of energy or heat that is within them. But there's still a range, there's a limit, there's a definition to them. But yet the transgender group or crowd won't even want to listen to that, which it then gets really crazy and off the rails, and then they're constantly pitting themselves against each other in definitions, and it starts to fall apart because it's not really about a cohesive belief. It is a rejection of the design, saying, no, I am God, I define what my gender is, I define who I am and what I am, rather than allowing your creator or the nature of who you are as a human being to define it for you. And then you start running into even worse issues at that point.
Yeah, it's a very modern or new agey thing to say, well, God is everywhere, and so therefore there is no God. And so the only thing that matters is my own happiness and joy. And so if there's anything out there that is making me not happy, I have to change it so that I can be happy. And so if I'm ever struggling with any problem ever, then I have to change it. It's one of the reasons that relationships don't last. It's one of the reasons that marriages fall apart. It's one of the reasons that people try to change their gender. It's why a lot of people leave their jobs, is because I'm not happy, therefore I must change the thing that's making me unhappy. Instead of saying, well, I'm not happy, but maybe that's a me problem, not an external problem. Maybe I need to reconcile something within myself. Maybe I need to submit to a higher power.
Right, like we hinted earlier. There again, if you see yourself as, I'm a good person and there's these things in the way of my happiness, then transgenderism, then prioritizing you, I just need my best life now, I just need some me time type of mentality, makes total sense. Total and absolute sense if you think people are truly good. But if you believe that you are a sinner, that you are a wretched person, you're an evil person, then you're not going to see it that way at all. You're going to be like, no, I need rules, I need standards to hold and confine myself to. I need principles and ideals that restrain my sin and my vice and orientate me in the direction I ought to be going, because I won't by nature.
Yeah. Bringing it back to the story we're going by, there's the idea, and it's more an idea than a rule at this point, but we see it play out. There's and you alluded to it in the name here, go woke, go broke. And this isn't quite there yet, but a lot of other things we've seen do that. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting as we look at who are the funders for this, and we're not going to go through all of them, but the top one that makes me chuckle is the Idaho Democratic Party.
$1,500, baby.
Yeah, at $1,500, which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's not very much money. So I guess good job, Idaho Democratic Party, for like half-heartedly supporting a thing.
Pride Fest for the Coeur d'Alene one. They want to support their underlings, but
Exactly. Yeah, but I thought that was funny. And then just, gosh, the list. You had an entire list here of groups that support this nonsense. And It makes me kind of sad Albertsons, Fred Meyer, Micron, Simplot, City, Hotbox Cannabis Dispensary, whoever that is, Zion's Bank, Full Circle Health, Wells Fargo, Target, Blue Cross of Idaho, Boise Weekly, Smirnoff. So I guess find a better not beer to drink. And it just keeps going. Planned Parenthood is on the list, of course, but Walmart, Cathedral of the Rockies,
Idaho National
Adam and Eve
Laboratory,
adult stores,
which gets our tax dollars.
right? The Democratic Party, Terry Riley Health, Mountain America Credit Union, like J.P. Morgan Chase, which that one doesn't surprise me at all. But the American Cancer Society,
because cancer is really high in transgender people for some odd reason. And for the record, that list is the list for the Boise for last year's 2023, their published list. For the Canyon County one, which we're talking about, they did a complete GoFundMe. So if you want and you are curious and you have the time, and for those people that decided not to donate anonymously to that, you can go through that list and see all the people who funded the Canyon County one, which is actually cool. I give them thumbs up for transparency. We will see if that happens next year. It probably won't. But for my sake, it made my research really easy because there was a button I clicked and I said top spenders, and it lined them up for me so pretty.
Yeah, well, and I can't hold it against them that they used GoFundMe for it. It makes me laugh and wonder if GoFundMe would allow a heterosexual parade funding platform, because typically they don't allow things like that.
Maybe the Old State Saloon over in Eagles should try that out.
They probably should. I know they've made a killing on their heterosexual awareness month, which I find it very funny. No, but this reminds me of this long list of people that support this nonsense. I know it's a thing that Tim Pool talks a lot about, of having an alternate economy. I'm trying to remember the name of the app off the top of my head that he supports.
It's like True Something. Or Square, what is it? I think I remember. Isn't it made by Donald Trump Jr. or whatever? I know what you're talking about, but you look it up and it shows freedom supported.
It's Public Square. So Public Square, they've created the largest network of businesses in the nation that celebrate life, family, and freedom. So, it's really easy to find companies that want to support the latest trends. It's harder to find companies that support conservative values, and so Public Squares is a place where people have started doing that now. I don't know how active they are in Idaho. I should probably
sadly not as active as you would like. I've wanted to use them more, but I haven't, mainly because they do really good for online sites. If you're talking about locality, it struggles, but cool thing. Welcome to things like Google Maps. If you are a business owner or you're friends with a business owner, and that loves God and country and traditional Judeo-Christian or just American traditional values, which I would argue is the latter, but we're splitting hairs at this point. You can actually sign up and ask to be added to that list. And so if that word gets out and we're encouraging more people to do that in the Valley, it might be even more useful, and that app would snowball effect kind of occurs there. I also know I signed up for them. Side note, if you're looking for a side gig or whatever else, they'll actually hire people on. You'll get commission for the amount of businesses you're able to sign up for the program that are actually in lockstep with that. So you can make a little side money if you go around being a representative for the company trying to get people on the app.
Powderhouse Brewing Company is on there. They're right around the corner from me. There you go.
They must have added some stuff since I last looked, but granted.
Yeah, no, there's actually quite a few hits on their map here. Somebody's been working hard on this area. That's cool.
Technology.
Right? It's a good thing.
It can be used for good. Surprisingly, I know the Amish may come and find me and say, I want your suspenders back, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to stand on that, and we'll...
You don't have enough of a neck beard, don't worry.
I couldn't if I tried. I really couldn't. For the viewer out there, I'll be completely honest. This right here, that's 2 or so years. I'm invested. It's not coming off for a bit. Maybe for something for the show down the line.
Well, you and I have the same philosophy. Shaving is for the birds, and so I stopped. So I approve of your not shaving.
Well, I shave down here is the problem. I want the hair that wants to come out here to move up is the problem that we're having.
I
but
see.
Anyway, Amish rant aside, coming back to Pride events. Obviously, there's the objection that the mayor gave, which is that, hey, free speech, we need to respect their Second Amendment rights. And that is a strong argument. But I'm going to be a little bit of a hot take there. That is a cop-out. That is a very politically smart excuse. And for people that know it. And the key part that comes into that is it's dependent. Me personally, I would argue it's on your definition of freedom. We've talked about it before. There's the traditional, there's the modern definition of freedom. The more options I have is the more free I am. But the more traditional definition of freedom is that laws and regulations, in a certain sense, that we pass that restrict vice and encourage virtue creates freedom, because by default, we're sinners. We are fallen. We are evil. And so laws and regulations that allow us to hopefully, in the public realm, because those laws apply to the public, in the public square, we pass laws and regulations that encourage righteous action and not sinful action. And so with that, with this example, yes, they have the right to free speech. They can talk. Yes, they can. But we also have these things called obscene laws, because there's children in public. Polity both means adults and minors. And we definitely, I would argue, don't want minors to be seeing that stuff, because that's something that happens within the bedroom. And some might say, well, pride events, we don't do that, and that doesn't come out here, whatever else. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but that happens at other events and things. And if, you say it doesn't happen, then cool. Well, then just go rent one of the event centers at the Caldwell Rodeo, where it's all indoors and you have to walk through doors for it. Problem solved. You can have your event now, and it's not in a public, in a sense, way. And the city council there, Nampa, or the mayor, could have pushed for that and said, no, you're not in line with public decency laws, and you're more than welcome to have the event, but it's going to need to be within a closed venue, which they already closed it off with fences, which is the weird part to me. They took an entire park and then they made it a private venue when they could have just said, no, we're not going to, as a city, we as a society in this local area, this local community, we're saying no. Local communities have a right, and I think an ability to exercise more authority than the federal government. We get so focused on the national, this podcast being a perfect example to try to get away from the national a little bit, that we, yes, at the national level, regulating what can be in public parks, that's bad, that's wrong. But for local cities, especially city councils and mayors at this point, they definitely have the authority to do that and regulate it according to the will of the people that are reaching out and telling them to represent them. And if people in Nampa don't want that, it shouldn't be there in public, and they should have that ability to form their community in that way.
Well, the other side of free speech is this, and this is another one that kind of might stick in the craw of free speech absolutists, but it's the idea that, yes, we believe in free speech. I believe in the fact that I should defend your right to say things that I disagree with. But if it's your position that you're for free speech only if it's things that you agree with, but you want to censor ideas and opinions that you don't agree with, well then I am no longer going to protect your free speech if your free speech is saying to stop letting other people have free speech, right? And so one of the things that we see, and bringing up the idea, or bringing up the example of the Bar and Eagle, Old State Saloon, they decided that they were going to have Heterosexual Awareness Month. Well, what happened? They got attacked by who? The gay pride community. Why? I don't know, because they have to have everyone agree with their point of view. If they truly believed in free speech, they wouldn't attack people who said things they disagreed with. And so this is where my patience and my desire to allow free speech to happen for people that don't allow free speech from other people, I have no reason to defend people who use free speech and then throw it away as soon as they get what they want. There's no use for that in our society. And I think, honestly, that's one of the things that is happening in our society that is causing it to snowball, because we've allowed socialists and communists take these things and use them for their own purposes and co-opt them and then shut out everyone else. It's like pulling up the ladder behind you when you get to a point. You get some amount of power and say, look, I am now in power. No one else can have this power.
Right.
And that's just not okay.
Right. I mean, there's the ladder polling. There's also the other way I've heard it described is that, and I was actually talking to someone that was a bit more libertarian on this, and they gave a funny response to it, and I'll share it. People might chuckle a little bit, but there will always be levers of power. The question is who is controlling those. If you abdicate and say, well, there aren't any levers of power, just close your eyes, they don't exist, right? And say there aren't, society doesn't say that there's good or right or wrong speech. All speech is free, free speech absolute. You're just closing your eyes to the fact that there is certain speech that is encouraged and discouraged, be it if it's at the local level, if it's at a federal level, whatever level of government you want. Your church does it. You do it in your family. Certain words you're not allowed to say, right? There's a certain level of, yes, there's free speech. Yes, you should be allowed to express your opinions and work through tough ideas and concepts, and that is something that the Second Amendment should be there for. But there's a certain event to other terms and words and things that they don't encourage virtue, right? They encourage vice and violence and other problems to occur. And when it comes to the discussion of like, well, what happens if that person gets in and they censor your speech or that or whatever else? My answer to that is those levers are always going to be there until the day we pass away and we go to heaven. There's this constant fight for those levers of political power, and those that wield them will be affected. The left is not scared at wielding them at all. We know that full well. We see that here, like you were giving that example, where they take control and they pull the ladder up and they say, cool, I'm pulling on these levers. I'm using these things. Conservatives, though, seem to forget it so often. We'll get power, and it's the constant grumble I hear. Republican gets in the White House, or we have a Republican Congress, or we have a Republican House, or whatever you want to call it. And then they're like, but they get nothing done. Yeah, because we as conservatives for a long time are scared to pull these levers. But it's part of governing a society is you need to take a stand and go, are you going to get it wrong? Yes, you're going to get it wrong. But it's better to move towards some truth, hold to something, aim for the truth than nothing at all. Now, on that, one thing for your context and to reach out for, to keep in mind if these people are your representatives and stuff, there was House Bill 265, which attempted to actually prevent this very thing from being possible. It was a law that was going to aim to say that there needed to be stronger levels for public decency law. It was pushed forward by the Idaho Family Policy Center. Sadly, it stalled out in the State Affairs Committee. The basic gist of it was that it was going to use the explicit material law that I think the Supreme Court, it's like a 4 whatever, we've talked about in a previous episode, I can't remember the exact term for it, that defines, according to our legal system, was explicit. It was going to apply those to public events, and if those events met that threshold, then they couldn't be public. They had to be something that was guarded off so minors couldn't see it. It didn't say pride events couldn't happen. It just said pride events couldn't be out where minors could see it. Now, who do you have to, I'm not specifically saying, I think there are great people on this, but the State Affairs Committee, the people that were on that were involved in it, you might want to reach out to them and get their 2 cents and hear what they are, and maybe you need to apply some more pressure to them. The chair for that committee was Brett Crane. The vice chair was Julie Young. And then the other people that sat on that committee was Joe A. Palmer, Vito Barberari, James Holtzclaw, Heather Scott, Kevin Andrews, Bruce D. Skog, Christopher M. Allgood, Jaron Crane, John Gannon, and Theodore Achilles. That's the roster for that committee. So if this was something that you wish there was something on the books for the 2023, not the 2024 legislative session, this was something that was tried to be pushed through. So you might reach out to your representative. If these are yours, you might reach out and ask them, well, why did that stall? Why did you not put more pressure on the chair to pull it out? But a little bit of context there, also tying it back again to the legislature, that things are happening. People are trying to fight this, but sadly there are those that surprisingly would want more of that in public and not less. It's surprising that there are those that wouldn't want to wield the levers of power to say that minors shouldn't be able to see these things and cities can't decide that. But that wraps us up completely. I know we've gone all over the place for this. I don't know what part of this will be kept for this whole thing. But with all of this, it did happen. We are almost out of June. Praise the Lord to a certain degree. Just when you see a rainbow, think of the flood, think of Noah. Not. I decided to have a little fun with it at the front end there. And if you want to change this, if you're really fiery, passionate about the fact that you don't want pride, you don't want it in your local communities, you want to prevent it, the best thing I can give you is keep your elected officials accountable. Accountability is where it starts. that you're like, wait, you won't willpower? I voted you in. I want you to do these things. I want you to ban these things. I want you to do things. I don't want you to just sit and fill a seat. I want you to do things. So the easiest way to do that is voting, and the strongest form of voting, like we gave you earlier, is those certain individuals on that top list, or for the Boise Pride Festival, vote with your dollar, vote with your money, and try to hopefully find alternatives or different ways to go and spend your money that send a message to those companies that no, we won't stand for this, we don't want this in Idaho, and don't do it. Thank you for tuning in to the entire show. Hope you found it both enjoyable and informative. If we missed anything or got something wrong, please reach out to us via email at lyimedia@protonmail.com or on Twitter at localyokel.idaho. We appreciate your support and feedback as we work to bring you the most interesting and important stories from across Idaho. That's all for now. Have a great rest of your week. Godspeed.